Hello chess lovers! This legendary chess match will feature a match between Bobby Fischer and James Terry Sherwin. This match took place at the New Jersey Open Championship in 1957. Okay, let's go straight to the game. The match begins with white pawn e4 answered black pawn c5. Next, the white knight f3, black answers pawn e6. White pawn d3, black knight c6. White pawn g3, respond by black knight jump to f6. White bishop g2, replied black knight e7. White did a short castling, followed by a black also did a short castling. Next, Fischer moves the white knight to d2, and Sherwin moves his black rook to b8. White rook e1 to control e-file, repaid by black pawn d6. At this time, the two players seem to be still in their respective positions. White pawn c3, black pawn b6. White starts the attack by advancing a pawn to d4, inviting a pawn exchange, but black is not interested. Black advanced the queen to c7. Another white pawn goes to e5, threatening the knight, and the knight avoids the threat by jumping forward to d5. Pawn gets pawns. In return, the black knight gets pawns. The white knight jumps to e4, the black pawn c4. The white knight gets the dark knight. In return, the queen gets the knight. Then, Fischer got more aggressive by advancing the knight to g5, threatening the pawn on h8 and f8. Black knight e7. White queen c2 threatens checkmate in one move. Black avoids threat with knight jumping to g6. White pawn h4 assists attack. Answered knight f6 strengthens protection to pawns. In this move, Fischer makes a sacrifice with a knight catching a black pawn on h7. Answered, the knight catches the knight. White pawn h5 threatens the knight. The knight dodges to h4 and also performs a sacrifice. However, the sacrifice hasn't been accepted. White advanced his dark bishop to f4, threatening the black queen, and answered by moving the queen to d8, letting the rook to be captured, and also this puts the black fortress under threat. But Fischer didn't capture the rook with his white bishop. Instead, he moves his white pawn, catching the sacrificed knight, and black rook advanced to b7, avoiding the threat of the dark white bishop, and become a bait for bright white bishop. White is getting more aggressive by advancing the pawn to h8 for destroying the king's defense. This move is answered by the black aggressive action by capturing the white pawn on h4 by the queen. The next step, the white pawn begins the destruction of the black king's defense. First, the white pawn captures the black pawn on g7 to dismantle the black king's defense while making threats to the black rook and pinning the king. There is no option for black to avoid the pinch except capturing the g7 pawn. Next is the white rook e4, preparing check by the dark bishop as well as the threat of the rook against the queen. And to avoid the threat, the black queen retreats to h5. The rook retreats to e3 in preparation for check in g3. Answered the black pawn f5. The white rook apparently didn't check but moved to h3. threatening the queen, and the queen avoid the threat to e8. The dark white bishop is making check, blocked by the black knight jumping to f6. White queen d2, black king f7. White queen g5 threatens the knight, black queen e7, protecting the knight. The bishop catches the knight and threatening the queen. The queen replied with catching the knight and threatening the white queen back. The black queen's threat is ignored by the white rook on h7, and the black king had no choice but to retreat to e8. Queen catches queen. Answered, the black rook catches the white rook. Let's analyze this step. If the rook catches the white queen at f6, it will be answered by the bright white bishop captures the rook at b7. Bishop catches bishop. The answer is the rook catches the bishop. In this position, white will certainly win because it has two rooks, while black only has one rook. That's why in the original game, black preferred to capture the white rook on h7, waiting for an opportunity to counterattack. But white doesn't give black a chance. White checks by his bright bishop at c6, and after this move, black declared resign. Black resigned because if this move is continued by closing check by the bishop's move to d7, then it will be answered by the queen step to e6. Check. Blocked by the rook e7, check by the bishop by catching the black bishop on d7. King dodges to d8, queen h6 threatens the rook. The rook protects the rook, answered by the white bishop e6 threatens the rook. The rook f6 threatening the white queen and bishop at the same time. The queen answer g5 pinning the rook. Another rook threatens to attack by moving to e8. White will answer, the queen catches the rook. Check. The king evades to c7 will be answered by the queen to f7. Check while threatening the rook. If the king dodges, it's certain that the black rook will disappear, and the superiority of white will be more clearly visible, while the black is without protection and pointless pawn moves. Such was the interesting match in 1957.